All right, everybody, how we doing? How we doing? Pretty early, huh? Okay. So, yeah, we gotta go through some stuff. Hold on. I know the stream time is a little bit later than usual. Today's a bit of a tight day for me, just because I have something I've got to go to shortly after this. But we still got time for our stream. Also, I'm running a little bit low on sleep. Oh, shit. Little bit low on sleep, so I might be a little bit all over the place. But I have espresso, so I should be okay. All right. Hello. How we doing? Oh my god. Yeah, my hair needs to dry. All right. You know what? We'll just leave it. I'm not gonna stop messing with it. Stop messing with it. No more messing with it. All right. Maybe a little bit, but I'll try and leave it alone for the moment. All right. How's everybody doing? Let's get the stream likes up to 50 real quick. I've realized over the course... Okay, so if you guys remember, as of last... How are people feeling now? Because as of last couple streams, I think when we did last Friday's stream, covering 1165, people were hyped over the fight. People were happy, at least everybody in the stream. As we went on, I realized that Monday, we did like some rankings of best fights in One Piece. I think people were a little bit more lukewarm. It did make it all the way to the finals. In the bracket of best fights in One Piece. So people a little bit more lukewarm. Fading Faces Emoji look 5 years younger. I just shaved. But that's good to know. And as of the Tuesday video I just dropped, talking about the fight, I realized that a lot of people were somewhat underwhelmed by the fight. And then I'm realizing on Twitter as well, in the wake, I guess the aftermath, I guess the following week, right? People are also a little bit more, let's say, lukewarm about the fight in general. So I liked it. I get why people might feel like it's, I don't know, underwhelming. But here's my new thoughts on the fight. Okay. After having had some time to think, I think I've touched on this before, but this is my current thoughts, okay? This fight, the simple situation is, I feel like if Oda had not hyped up the fight in advance, let's say we didn't know any of this was coming, then I think the fight is gold. Like, I think it's absolutely gold. So, for example, the Hachinosu raid, we'd gotten the heads up, like, one chapter in advance that, like, Garp's headed to Hachinosu, so it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. But it was, like, a very small little drop of information, and then when the Hachinosu raid happened, it was just, like, mind-blowing. It was like, holy shit, like, we're seeing Garp come in with, like, this crazy Haki moves, like, this Galaxy Impact and stuff, and then Garp versus Aokiji's happening, now all the Blackbeard Pirates, and now Kobe's coming in with this Honesty Impact. Like, the whole sequence of events was out of the blue. So it's a big shock for us, right? Similarly, just any sort of, like, Law versus Blackbeard, people were really hyped when it happened. Even if people don't rate that fight really highly, people were very hyped when it happened. And even if you go back to the Odin flashback, right? So the Odin flashback, from what we knew, was mainly going to be an Odin flashback. We knew that he'd spend some time on Roger and Whitebeard's ships and stuff, but we didn't know where stuff was going. And so, all of a sudden, when it was like, Whitebeard is going to meet Roger, we got to that chapter, and then the chapter was actually Roger and Whitebeard clashing. That was a wildly popular chapter. People were absolutely nutting over it. People were really, really excited. People just loved that shit, right? And it was just a single clash. I think the big reason is when something is happening that you don't realize is going to happen. I mean, it's very straightforward, right? It's not rocket science. It's not some mind-blowing psychology I'm breaking down here, but I'm just thinking, I'm like, why is it that I feel like if we just got that fight, like, I'm looking at that fight in a vacuum, and I kind of went and compared it to other fights, right? I'm like, I think that this is, for a non-Straw Hat fight, for a fight that's a flashback fight, technically side characters and stuff, We actually got quite a bit out of this. But it's the fact that Oda already told us about this matchup way far in advance in 957. He hyped up this specific matchup, Roger and Garp versus Rocks, and then he built a whole flashback leading up to that matchup focusing on those three characters. So it's just gonna feel different when we get there, right? It's just gonna feel different. So naturally, it's not readers' expectations, it's more so the author set expectations for this for us. So naturally, we're gonna with like something like Roger and Whitebeard clashing, you can't feel underwhelmed or you can't feel like it didn't meet expectations because the simple fact that we got the clash was exciting. Like, it was really cool for us just to get a little glimpse of those two. I think the other factor in this is that I think that people did probably want to see something a little bit new from this fight. So I thought about this because a lot of people are saying that it was just like Haki attacks that we've seen before and everything. And you guys know me, like, I've been on the train of like, well, I want to see new levels of Haki Bloom, etc., right? But I think even if I took my own personal speculations, theories, etc. out of it, I'm like, why were people so excited when certain moments in the story happened? Like, when Roger and Whitebeard had their one clash, what was really cool is that we got that moment where their blades weren't touching, right? That was exciting and new. It was a very brief interaction, but it felt like we'd all dreamed about like what it would look like if Roger and Whitebeard ever clashed, right? And we never expected that Oda would ever actually show us that. So then when Oda shows us that, one, it's exciting, we're going in with no expectations, and two, Oda's showing us not much of it, but he's showing us something really crazy and never before seen in One Piece, right? And that's got Odin yelling, oh my god, they're not even touching and everything like that. And then that sets up for a nice segue into the explanations of Advanced Conquerors Haki later on during Luffy versus Kaido, right? So that's why it's so simple. Like, why is it that Roger versus Whitebeard was so satisfying or so exciting for readers when that chapter came out? Whereas here, some people feel underwhelmed, even though objectively we get way more out of this than we did out of Roger versus Whitebeard. It's because of those two things. One, we never expected to actually ever get to see Roger versus Whitebeard on screen. We did. That's exciting. That in itself is like, oh my god, we found buried treasure that we didn't even know existed, right? And two, even though the fight was very brief, it was just a panel, it showcased us something that broke our previous expectations of what could happen in One Piece, which is kind of what you would hope for if you ever got this sort of dream matchup of Roger versus Whitebeard, right? So I think that's the other part of this, which is like, even if I set aside my own, like, oh, I had my own speculations, etc., of new levels of Haki, etc., right? In retrospect, the fact that we got to see Roger and Garp fight Rocks, and while they did have really big Haki moves, we kind of realized that we're not going to see anything that kind of changes our perception of the ceiling of Haki that much. I guess you could argue Rocks doing a solo sky split. I think that that's something that one could argue is really different, but it doesn't have quite the same sort of magical feel of that first clash between Roger and Whitebeard, where we're introduced to this concept of like such a gigantic gap between two conquerors users' weapons, right? And like that level of Haki. I think even looking at, for example, the Hachinosu raid, right? Part of the reason it was so exciting was because it opened with Garp doing this galaxy impact attack, which was up till that point, we'd never realized that you could really do a Haki punch of that sort of scale, where the not touching effect is actually like 100 meters or something like that. So that in itself was very exciting the moment the battle started, right? And then you're seeing moves like Galaxy Divide, stuff like that. So that's kind of my thoughts right now, which is I still like the fight, and I think in a vacuum it's a really good fight. But I think it's the weird thing where if you build up a fight in advance, then you're selling the readers a dream, right? So then you need to show them the dream, right? So the dream can't be something that readers themselves could have basically just like written up, if that makes sense in their heads, right? So that's the tricky part. I still think it's a good fight, though. I keep reiterating that. I think it's a really good fight. I just think that if you got to pick one or the other. Like, if Oda had never hyped up this fight and he just talked about a vague God Valley incident and never established what the matchups were, then I think people would be loving this entire sequence of events that just happened, which is like, holy shit, Emu just showed up, and then Everybody on God Valley, all the Yonko and the Pirate King, yada yada, they all teamed up against Imu. And then Imu actually took control of Rocks, and then Rocks fought the Yonko. And then Rocks fucking fought Roger and Garp, who teamed up together. I think that whole sequence of events would have been mind-blowing if we had no idea that it was going to happen. I think it's just very difficult to live up to expectations if you already set it in advance. Even looking at something like Marineford. Marineford was a fight that Oda built up to for a long time, and he told us that it's going to happen for 50 chapters in advance. But Oda didn't tell us the details in advance of what's going to happen. He didn't say that, oh, Whitebeard's going to fight Akainu, you're going to see, like, Kizaru and Marco interact and stuff. Like, he didn't tell us the details, so every single page that you turn on Marineford was a pleasant surprise. We just knew it's going to be a big battle, and then we're not going into it feeling like, oh, this has to happen, that has to happen. That's why a lot of people still love the Whitebeard Akainu stuff from Marineford, whereas if we'd somehow been told in advance that Whitebeard versus Akainu is going to be the most important sort of matchup of Marineford, then people might have been reading Marineford being like, that's it, we didn't get that many pages of it. Does that make sense? I think that's what a lot of this comes down to. Carnage, thanks to the 5. Main issue for me is characters like Rocks getting Dami reversied. It's fine with Dorian Brogy, but when it's a top tier like Rocks, it's meh. Yeah, it's difficult because it's also just like, here's the thing. It's not even just like the top tier aspect, right? I think it's also just the type of character Rocks is. It feels straight up disrespectful to him. Because you look in these backstories, tragic things happen to these characters, of course. Lots of tragic things happen to these characters. But it still feels like they're left with their pride and self-respect and dignity in a lot of senses, right? So, like, you know, Bellamere is killed. And it's terrible, but she goes out, like, proudly protecting her children, right? All across the board, like, Hiruluk, what a way to go out, man. Like, amazing final words and everything like that. Fisher Tiger, shot, like, riddled with bullets and everything like that. And he goes out stubbornly, but it's still, like, he's going out on his terms, in a sense. All these characters, like Tom's got a phenomenal final speech, and he goes out on his terms. I think there's something to that, right? That's the crazy thing about Rocks, because his story, he was the most strong-willed character. He's as strong-willed as any character out there. All-time great pirate, like maybe the greatest pirate, depending on how you look at things. Just a legendary, like a true legendary figure, and it felt like Oda painted such a myth of a man with Rocks. And I think that's the thing. It's like, it's not like this is, you know, like when we see Doflamingo controlling like King Riku or something like that, it's just like, it's just fucking King. Like, King Riku looks pathetic, and he's made to look pathetic and stuff, but we also don't really have like a ton of we're just like, King Riku, just another one of those classic dopey One Piece kings who can't handle shit on their own, and so Luffy the Strat's got to come in and save him. Classic dopey king. What a dope. You know, that's the kind of the attitude with King Riku. It's just another one of those guys, right? Rocks is not that, right? Rocks, it feels like, you know, if we saw that happen to Whitebeard, you know, Whitebeard being puppeteered around, like look at the way that Whitebeard goes out. It's amazing. Like, the most manly of manly final moments, right? I cannot imagine Oda doing something like this to Whitebeard. It's just, that's the bigger thing, which is, it's not even about strength, right? It's not about strength. I don't mind Rocks being Dami reversied. We kind of just came to terms with that look, even the strongest characters can get Dami reversied, right? It's just how pathetic he essentially, like, he's begging, like, please kill me and stuff like that. Like, it's hard to see. I don't dislike that in and of itself, though, because I want to see Rocks' final moments, his final chapter. It is ultimately a tragedy. It is just a little bit, like I when Oda usually makes us cry over characters or whatever, and feel bad for them, especially in backstories, it's like this sort of, like, profound sense of tragedy, but there's also a sort of, like nobility to it that also makes it all the more powerful. It's rare for Oda to have a character go out in a manner that really humiliates them, and that's not like One Piece's usual thing, you know? Like, this isn't like Game of Thrones or something like that. Oda tries to kill characters, like good guy characters, with a sense of, you know, profound tragedy, but not like shitting on them, if that makes sense. So I think that's another part that's different about Rocks, is the way that he's going out so far, but it's not, I want to read the rest of the backstory. I don't want to cast judgment just yet on it. It is a little rough to see him treated like that, you know? Let's get the stream likes up to 50 real quick. Abraham Jean-Louis, thanks for the 5. Do you think Garling got a high reputation because Emu needed a way to cover his existence and he was a poster star to protect their narrative? Ah, shit. Yeah. So Garling's title is a fucking lie. Because maybe the world government spun it as like Garp was the one who took care of business, but like maybe they also spun it as like Garling was a big part of it as well. That's entirely possible. Sean Easton, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 30 months, man. I hope you're able to check out the Pirate King podcast that just came out, man. It was a really fucking long one. I think I legitimately might need to stop promoting the Pirate King podcast so much because at this point, like, we get so many... It's a lot of questions, which I really, really appreciate. I appreciate how many Pirate King tier members there are, but now there's a lot of fucking questions. This last one took me, like, over 2 hours to finish. And, like, before when I started, there'd be, like, about an hour, then it started getting to an hour and a half. Now it's, like, over 2 hours and everything. And I really enjoy doing them because I feel like... I love doing the Pirate King podcast because I feel like that's where I get questions that are really fun and I can be a little bit more just out there with my answers and, like, really let my mind go a lot of different places. And I get questions on things that aren't One Piece. Like, we got a Zelda question in the last Pirate King podcast that just came out this week. Literally yesterday. Like my 5 favorite, like rank my favorite Zeldas and stuff. So I enjoy that aspect, but like, yeah, I don't know. Like we're getting a lot. So I hope you were able to catch that. If you're a Pirate King member who didn't submit your question, please watch the Pirate King podcast because there's a lot of stuff in there. So Sean Easton, thanks a lot, man. I think that the whole Haki mask thing really helps set up fights for the end of the story. You have a limited amount of Haki and can pour more or less into attacks or defense like Nen. I would not count on Oda for 1 second to stick to this sort of explanation whatsoever. I literally, like, it's just, to me, the Haki mask thing sounds like, so here's the thing. We already knew that you run out of Haki. That was actually established. I think the Haki mask thing is nothing new, because you go back to the story, we've already had little bits and pieces of this, like, Pika, like 1, you can't overcome the Haki unless you hit it with a greater amount of Haki, right? That was established in Zoro versus Pika. Zoro literally tells Pika, I can cut you as long as my Haki is stronger, right? I don't like that, by the way. I don't know why I don't like that. I think I just don't like that because, again, it's not about like a swordsmanship versus Haki thing. Obviously, those things are intrinsically entwined, but it also feels like is just the strongest sword slash like just who has the most Haki. I guess that makes sense. But anyway, it was established in Zoro versus Pika, right? And then the idea that you can run out of Haki, that's established in Luffy versus Katakuri. Luffy explains to Luffy literally talks while he's sitting outside the mirror world with Brule about how, like, you know, Haki is finite, you can run out of Haki, but I don't want to just like wait till he runs out of Haki, I want to take him on. This was nothing new. It's just the same principles, which is like, we are gonna, are both running out of Haki, right? But we can't actually break through his defenses unless we hit him with stronger Haki than he has up, already established in the story. We can go all out, but then we'll probably be tapped out of Haki after that. I don't think it's anything crazy new. I would not be surprised if Oda starts to make this, like, keep bringing this up, then that's cool. But it's not anything new, really. It doesn't challenge anything that's already been established with Haki. If anything, it's reiterating stuff that's already been talked about. I don't believe that Oda is necessarily going to be bringing this up a lot because there's just too many times that Oda sets some rule about Haki and it's like, okay, so now this is always this thing. And it's like, no, it's just not. It's not that thing. It doesn't matter. Meek, thanks for the 10. Pretty random question. If Dressrosa / Skypiea, even Alabasta / Wano to an extent, are microcosms of the broader story, what are their arcs One Piece treasure? For example, the Gold Bell, maybe. So here's the way I feel like I view the story of One Piece. The part that Oda has planned out by far the best is the end. And the end is his most elaborate story, sort of, right? And he came up with this elaborate sort of conclusion I'm sure he's even added pieces to it, right? He's a human. He has new ideas, right? But he probably started with a fairly elaborate conclusion. He's hinted as much, or basically said as much in many interviews and things like that. And so then he set the heroes on a trajectory towards that conclusion. Now, Oda began to want to expand the story as he goes. And the simplest way, while still staying true to the essence of the final conflict that he crafted, to keep coming up with mini stories on the way to this final story, is to take elements of that final story and include them, or like write smaller storylines that are sort of like offshoots of them, right? But that's why I don't think any individual arc, like be it Dressrosa, be it Skypiea, be it Alabasta, be it fucking Arlong Park, I think so many of these arcs have elements, even Drum Kingdom, like so many of these arcs have elements that are, you know, a microcosm of what happens later, but it doesn't have all of the elements. Because if it had all of the elements, then we'd just be reading that final story, right? So, and Oda's not going to do just like a direct mirror parallel where like he writes an individual arc where every single thing, every single character, every single plot line is a direct parallel to what he's going to do in the final arc, right? So what I personally see is you look at storylines like Wano's a great example. Wano has a ton of stuff like that is directly paralleling so much of the conclusion of One Piece, right? Like this kingdom overthrown, evil power takes over, but the will of the Kozuki is sent into the future to bring dawn to Wano. They literally call it bringing the dawn to Wano. That's Toki's speech. He's like, one day Wano will know the dawn or whatever. Kinemon literally tells Kaido, like, I will bring the dawn to Wano, etc. It's the same parallel, like send the message into the future, yada yada. It's a sharp parallel to everything that's happening in the grander thing, and then obviously Nika comes along and saves the day, right? Dressrosa, a lot of similar, lot of parallels to the end of the story as well, but it has different parallels, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't, like, let's say the final storyline of One Piece, this is how I view it, right? Let's say the final storyline of One Piece has like 30 story elements. Like, this is just hypothetical, right? Like, let's just say it has 30 story elements that make up the plot, okay? It's like, world was good. There was a good king. There was this rebel guy named Joy Boy. There's a usurper that took over. There's like a message that has to be sent to the future. There's a great treasure that's fought over. There's a princess involved. Let's say it's just list out 30 elements, okay? I think for many of the preceding One Piece arcs, Oda kind of picked like what he wants to craft that arc around. He will draw a certain number of elements from his final storyline. So let's say like, for this arc, I want there to be a good king. I want there to be some big conspiracy as to why the king actually turned evil, but it's actually because of this usurper or something like that. And for this one, I also want there to be a treasure, and I want there to be a will to be passed down, right? So like, he will take a certain number of elements and then craft a story around that. And so that's why it's not like every single arc is a direct parallel to one another, but you will see tons of overlap. And so I'll see a bunch of elements that overlap between Alabasta and Dressrosa, but then I'll also see a bunch of elements that parallel between Dressrosa and Skypiea. And Skypiea and Alabasta don't really have any overlap. So what I'm seeing is basically different slices of a broader set of story elements that Oda is sort of allocating between arcs. Does that make sense? So when you ask, that's a long roundabout way of me addressing the question. You say, what are their arcs One Piece treasure? For example, the Gold Bell. I think that those are not necessarily arcs that have, what do you call? I don't think every arc necessarily has a One Piece treasure. I think that Oda avoids doing the exact same thing or the exact same story elements every single arc, because otherwise it gets very repetitive. Like, and the reader can see the same storyline playing out over and over again. So I think the way that Oda's done it is very, very clever. It took like so many arcs of One Piece before a lot of these broader, like, consistent elements really, really started becoming apparent. Some of them were apparent from the beginning. Like, a lot of readers for a long time have picked up on the idea that, like, One Piece, they go to an island, bad guys have taken over or trying to take over, and there's a princess involved. That's a very common thing that readers have picked up on. But then, like, some of the more nuanced slices, like, it's more recently that people have been picking up on, like, so many of Skypiea's parallels to the future, and then Skypiea's parallels to Dressrosa, and then Dressrosa's parallels to Wano and things like that, you know? Because it's over a long period of time, finally, like, Oda's broader set of story elements really start to kind of become clear. But he is very, very. He's been obviously really good in like how he's kept most of it like hidden and split up for the majority of the story. Eric E, thanks for the oh shit. Eric E, thanks for the 5. I like the fight, but my prediction for this week is still this. Reversi rocks regenerates, and Roger has his Haki Bloom to save Rayleigh and Scopper. You know, man, I would love if you are right. I would love if you were right. If you were right, that would make my day. Hold on, give me a second here. It'd be crazy if rocks... The one thing I'd say is that I feel like it's a really... Here, I'll share this stuff in a second. I feel like it's a really bad call by Oda if he... what do you call... Hold on. Uh, 164. If Oda... I think the timing of his break was very, very poor if the fight is going to continue between... Rocks and the rest of them. Because hold on. So I'm supposed to have my second monitor working here. That's weird. The fuck? All right, hold on. What the hell? All right, I think I fixed it. It should take care of it. What the fuck? Oh man, that's frustrating. All right, we might have to do this on single monitor. That makes it very difficult for me to... Hold on. Keep track of chat. All right, I will try. I'll try. How did I used to do this? How did I used to keep track of chat before my second monitor? I swear I had a method. Okay, I'm going to move the camera for 1 second. This might fuck up the whole thing. Okay, that should be better. What the hell? This is frustrating. You know what? Okay, there's a method. There's a method to everything. Oh my god. Okay. All right. I kind of just want my monitor to work. Make life a million times easier. Come on, man. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Yes. All right. There we go. There we go. I hate technology so much. I think this is the one area that I'm probably similar to Gen Z. Because Gen Z is really bad with computers and shit, right? As far as I know, that's like one of their weaknesses, aside from everything. Yeah, I think that's where I'm similar to Gen Z. You know what? Maybe I was just Gen Z in my heart all along. Just dumb and computer illiterate. Okay, let's see. Does this work? Okay. Yeah, I like this. Okay, this works. All right. Now we can get it rolling. Hold on. All right. Here we go. So starting off with Eric E. Reversey rocks regenerates, and Roger has his Haki bloom to save Rayleigh and Scopper. I would love if that happens. Fingers crossed. Justin, what's up, man? You had a great Pirate King question this week, by the way. It got me thinking. Justin Holland, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 37 months. What are your thoughts on the critical mass aspect of Haki? It kind of reminds me of Zoro's epiphany about cutting steel in Alabasta, but with Haki. Maybe it's about the regulation of Haki in combat. I just don't think it's anything new or crazy. I don't think that that's like a revelation, because Zoro already talked about it in Dressrosa. It was just like, oh yeah, more Haki. Pico's like, you can't cut me because my Haki's so strong, and Zoro's like, well, that's only if your Haki's stronger than mine. So to me, that's just, I think that's been established. I don't think that that's anything really new. I mean, we've kind of seen it throughout the story. Stronger characters win, like, overpower weaker characters when it comes to Haki stuff, right? Drink water, Pegdy's leg, thanks for the 10. Call me Cope, but prediction. Roger and Garp are down, Rox regenerates. Rayleigh and Gavan come to them, and then this is where Roger will have his Haki bloom when Rox attacks them. Unfortunately, Drinkwater, that is the same as Eric E. I think I've unfortunately brainwashed too many of you guys to believe this. Not brainwashed, but like, obviously I think it's really good storytelling, but I think we were all writing that. Sometimes I feel bad, because like, I feel bad if I like present something that could be really interesting in the narrative, and then, no, I shouldn't feel bad about that, but then it's like, then we all get interested in it, and then, not all of us, but like a lot of people in the chat get interested in it, and then we hope for that to happen. With this whole fight, I was not like fixating on, I hoped that Roger would get like this sort of a moment that had been kind of talked up in the past, but I kind of tempered my own expectations going in to be like, just enjoy the fight for what it is, and so I was still able to enjoy the fight. Like, I wasn't like, oh, this has to happen or I'll be upset. Drink water. How about you just do a normal comment? I'll catch it so you can give some other prediction. B Muddy 120, thanks for the 10. Hey Morge, longtime fan Muddy. King Recon knows me. Ah, that's nice. You and OP-tubers, God/universe, predestined to join me, chosen one reincarnated to save America and world with Spirit Story Universe / God's plan and revolution. Recon knows you, huh? Alright. I gotta ask Recon some questions about the people he's been hanging out with. B Muddy, thanks for the 5. We lost the real life ace. My brother Rick Rude died. Oh. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I was making jokes. I didn't read the second comment. I'm sorry about that, man. I'm sorry for your loss. Brother Rick Rude. America collapsing like Rome, Great Depression. Recon knows all this. Faded letters. SS goes to Rick. If your brother passed away, I am sorry to hear that, man. I cannot understand the rest of your message, though. I'm gonna move on. I hope you're doing okay. Sean Easton, thanks for the 5. Considering how Gear 4th was Luffy using a kind of Haki mass form, which let him hit above his weight class, I definitely think it'll be in the future. With Gear 4th, my interpretation was just that, like, Luffy's kind of overcoming. I don't think his Haki was better than Doflamingo's, and I don't know if Gear 4th in itself, like, boosts his Haki. What I feel like I've seen with Gears, right, with Luffy, is that he's kind of using Gear 4th. He kind of used Gear 4th as a way to, like, overcome a gap in Haki by, at the time, I don't think Luffy's armament Haki was necessarily better than Doflamingo's. Maybe it was on par, who knows, right? But I think that Gear 4th was kind of a way for Luffy to boost, it just boosts his muscle mass, right? So, like, it's not like just Haki alone is all that matters, right? Like, for example, if Doflamingo got hit by Fujitora's meteor point blank, then it would still probably have fucking hurt him, even if he's, like, blocking with Haki, right? So, to me, that's kind of Luffy trying to make up for, like, he's obviously coating himself with Haki, but he's also just, like, making his entire form much more muscle-bound, right? So it's doubling up on toughness. It's both your physical toughness increasing and your Haki toughness. That's my interpretation of what happened. because it was mostly talking about the muscle mass and everything, and like how his body's very muscular now and coated with Haki. I don't think gears magically boost Luffy's Haki ability. It's the same thing with Bajrangan. Like, Bajrangan overpowered Kaido, not because Luffy suddenly had better Conqueror's Haki than Kaido, but because it's a combination, right? Luffy's Conqueror's Haki coding was already really good. It just wasn't quite on par with Kaido's, but he was holding on. Like, he was doing fine-ish. Like, he was able to kind of swing with him, right? But it wasn't as good as Kaido's. Bajrangan was him bringing the fruit into the equation, so now it's like, okay, well, it's the same Haki, but now it's attached to basically an island-sized fist, right? So I don't think that Luffy's fruit can boost his Haki. I don't think any of his gears boost his Haki, as far as I can tell. I think they just add in more muscle and force into the equation. I think that's also a reason why, for example, if you look at the difference between when Luffy's fighting Kaido, just like in straight base form with a bit of Gear 2 and stuff mixed in, versus when he switches over to using Gear 4th, right? Earlier, that used to be a big difference, like Luffy going from base to Gear 4th. But after Luffy had mastered Advanced Conqueror's Haki, so read from 1010 onwards, after that, there's not actually a big difference when Luffy goes from his base form to Gear 4th. Because at that point, he's got Advanced Conqueror's Haki. The main thing that's giving him attack power is the Advanced Conqueror's Haki. Gear 4th helps, but it's not like it actually dramatically... Like, it gives him a boost, but before, it used to be like normal Luffy, and then Gear 4 makes him way stronger, right? Like, it like takes him from being like... it almost exponentially boosts his abilities, right? You look at the Doflamingo fight, you look at the Katakuri fight, like, Gear 4th was really necessary for Luffy to, like, really multiply his strength. But after Luffy got Advanced Conqueror's Haki, suddenly the jump from his base form to Gear 4th was no longer that big, because at that point his Haki is so strong that the boost in physical capabilities that Gear 4th provides doesn't seem like it's changing that much. It's not like Luffy was like 2x, 3x times stronger when he goes from base to Gear 4th from what we saw in the Kaido fight. Gear 5th, even that, it provides him much more versatility, right? And it allows him to attach his Haki to like much bigger attacks, like Bajrangan. But it still seems like the main... the biggest boost he got was just learning Advanced Conqueror's Haki in general. So I don't think that the gears necessarily boost his Haki abilities. Derek Boppler, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 11 months, man. Prediction, Loki learns of rocks and decides to go up and destroy the world, stealing the hammer because he's mad at his dad for not helping rocks. That's a great prediction, because we got to let this stuff loop all the way back, right? Loki learns of rocks, decides to go destroy the world, stealing the hammer because he is mad at his dad for not helping rocks. Yeah, seriously, if I was Loki, I'd be fucking pissed. Because now we, the reader, are pissed at him too, at Harold too for this shit. Yeah, Drinkwater. Did Drinkwater Peggy's leg post anything else? Wait, was it Drinkwater Peggy's leg? Oh, I must be mixing it up. Hold on. Hold on. Yeah, Drinkwater Peggy's leg. Did you put... Okay, Drinkwater Peggy's leg. So, Morge, prediction. Probably very left field, but Harold comes to God Valley only to see the island Luciad. This is where Harold's failure was mentioned by Emu. Harold rebelled against the world government. Okay. I could definitely see Harold arriving at God Valley. Harold comes to God Valley, but sees the island Luciad. I'll leave it at that. Because it sounded like Emu was referring to some moment where Harold really turned against them. I don't know if just coming to God Valley would qualify as that. I want to... Like, we know there's still some notable beats that have to come for Harold's story. Not just his death, but the incident where he tears out his horns and stuff. I'm very curious what... Because it seemed like the story made a big deal out of that. Joseph eBay, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 13 months, man. Yo, Morge, I think I've cracked the story of One Piece. Oda has always paralleled the grander themes of One Piece before we realize them, then reveals it to us later. So we look to the past to solve the future. One Piece equals meat. I would be so here's the thing. I don't think you're crazy far off in that. First, let's get the Streamlabs to 100 real quick. I do think that one thing that has been hinted at a few times, and I talk about this in my big theory, the complete history of One Piece solved or whatever, the Void Century, the mural theory, right? So in that, one of the things I talk about is that there's a lot of things in the story that seem to point towards the answer that a lot of these nations, a lot of all these conflicts, etc., seem to be gravitating towards is like the problem of resources, right? So that's one of the reasons that I think Oda made Luffy so food obsessed, because while Luffy can't value certain things like gold and stuff like that, he can value food and like the people being able to eat and his friends being able to eat, right? Vegapunk also talks in Egghead about energy, like if we only had infinite resources, if we only had infinite energy, right? And Vegapunk talks about how most of the conflicts in the world are over resources. And you really look back through One Piece, and that really is the case, right? Alabasta, it's over water, right? Skypiea, it's over land, specifically the Verth, right? Wano, it's over food. So many of the... I'm not saying every conflict in One Piece, but a lot of the major conflicts in One Piece are framed as being around a certain resource, right? And it does seem like Oda's kind of pointing towards a solution or an ideal world being one where like everyone has as much as they want, as much as they need. So I actually do think there is some merit to the idea that the One Piece is not necessarily like literally just a giant slab of meat, but I think a world will be created where everybody has as much as they need. And that was like a key theme of Dressrosa as well, which is that the country used to be happy under Riku because even though they all weren't rich, everybody had as much as they needed, right? So it seems like that's an angle that Oda's really going for. I'm curious to see how that solution comes into play, but I had some theories about it that I think are pretty strong if you want to check out that mural theory. Dixo Smaller Pistol from the Balls, thanks for the 5. Rayleigh, Gaban, and Bagard buy Roger and Garp 10 minutes for their Haki to recharge. Viz translation indicates my Kaido Despair comment, BTW. What Kaido Despair comment? I'm sorry, I need to read Kaido's comment? Okay, I can check the Viz translation in a second. Rayleigh, Gaban, and Bagard. I don't know about Bagard, man, but if Bagard shows out, I will eat my words. By Roger and Garp, 10 minutes for their Haki to recharge. Knut Worgen, thanks for the 2. Jolly D. Joestar, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 4 months, man. Sword Piece, a YouTuber, made a video about Elbaf being the first arc to have a prepare for invaders scene based on the 7 Samurai. This is how the crew gets strong. Okay, so it is true that... So this is something that I did think about. This is actually like a video idea that I've had for a little bit, but I didn't feel like it's interesting enough to do, which is that Elbaf is different from other One Piece arcs in terms of narrative structure because usually when Straw Hats get to an island, there is already a problem that is either present and brewing or a problem that has already taken place, like Arlong took over or Kaido took over, that needs to be solved, right? So either something like Crocodile's trying to take over, Wapol is trying to take over, or a problem like the island needs to be freed, right? Somebody already took over and the island needs to be freed. Elbaf is different in that it truly felt like the first peaceful island that we've ever gone to. First peaceful island that we've ever arrived at, okay? Now, that sets the stage for basically, like, not even just the first peaceful island that we've arrived at, like an island that is like, there was no internal problem brewing either, right? That set the stage for basically the Straw Hats being entrenched in the island culture, so they're already friends with everybody in the island. It's already being treated kind of like their base, and the attack is coming from the outside, with the Straw Hats basically having to repel other characters, right? So not exactly it's similar ideas, right? So it is a fundamentally different arc structure in that sense. That's not the same as the 7 Samurai, though, so I don't know why he's saying that. I get why it's similar. 7 Samurai, I mean, Wano arc is more similar to 7 Samurai in that... No, because the Wano arc, I get what he's getting at. 7 Samurai, for those of you who don't know, the plot is pretty simple. It's basically village, there's raiders that are going to attack it or whatever, or they're already threatening to attack it, I forget, they've already been doing some stuff. And so some people leave for the village, and then they go out to the world searching to recruit 7 Samurai to come back to help them. And then the samurai basically come back, they help get the villagers ready and everything like that, and then they're able to fight back the intruders and all of that stuff, right? So, I get what he said. Wano strikes me more as Seven Samurai-esque because of, like, obviously the samurai aspect, but Kinemon, Momonosuke, etc., basically going out in the world to recruit people. But it's true that this was more so to recruit fellow allies to come back and help overthrow the current regime rather than to repel invaders. I think saying that this is Seven Samurai-esque just because it involves repelling invaders seems like a stretch to me. But I haven't seen the video, so maybe there's some good points. Just because I think there's a lot of storylines that involve, not in One Piece specifically, but a lot of storylines in fiction that involve, like, repelling bad guys from attacking. But the thing that generally Seven Samurai is known for, like what made it unique, and kind of set the trope going forward, was that Seven Samurai was a movie about collecting a group of heroes from the outside to bring them in to fight against villains, right? So that was kind of Seven Samurai's calling card. That's kind of what it's known for. You know, I don't think... I'd have to see the video. I don't want to critique a video that I haven't seen, but I think that basic concept of, like, well, they fight back people who are trying to intrude, like invaders or something, therefore it's like Seven Samurai. I think that's like a stretch because that's not really what Seven Samurai is known for. Like the impact that it had on cinema and fiction in general was this concept of like most movies or TV or like storylines that you see where it's like, oh no, like there's bad guys coming. Like there's a great video by like Every Frame a Painting about how even like modern day movies like The Avengers, like the trope of there's bad guys coming, we need to go out and recruit a team of heroes to come help fight and save us. That's what Seven Samurai really started and what it's known for. So like that's the trope that you see in so many different movies, films, etc. Now, Avengers being like a great modern day example of like even now that type of storytelling inspired from Seven Samurai. So that's my thought on that. But again, I'd have to see the video. I don't want to just critique for the sake of critiquing. But I think that's weird. Like I think it's picking at like something that happened to be in the movie, but isn't really what made the movie unique, if that makes sense. Whereas the thing that the movie is really known for is that specific plot line. The recruiting of heroes. Dr. Farewell, thanks for bringing a Pirate King tier member for 4 months, man. I like that Rox was Dami reversied. It was refreshing to see a D member go out sad and sets up Blackbeard as Emu's as the one to defeat Emu. Prediction, Harold arrives at God Valley and is the last person to see Rox. Unfortunately, we already have Harold arriving at God Valley. I could add in Harold is the last person to see Rox as like a addition to that. I have some thoughts on how Emu's going to be defeated, but I'm saving it for next Tuesday's video. I do not like this one. And Rox being Dami reversied, look, I don't inherently dislike it. I am more so looking forward to the, like, what's his send-off actually look like? What's the flashback chapter, you know? Julian Reed, thanks for the 2. I predict we see the God Valley prizes and who won them. Oh, fuck. That's actually a really good point. I forgot about that shit. We see the God Valley prizes. I don't know why I'm abbreviating. I'm sorry, Himutaro. Man, a lot of similar Harold predictions. Okay. Here we go. Okay, I guess I can add in... I'll give it to you if this is specifically correct. Harold is the one to hear... What is it? You said Harold... Harold listens to Rox's last words. Okay, I can do that. That's technically more specific. No more Harold predictions unless it's dramatically different from what we already have, because I feel like I'm kind of stretching for this to accommodate. Sean Easton, thanks for the 5. Prediction: we get Rox's final words. The poneglyphs are mentioned. I'll give you the poneglyphs are mentioned. I think Rox's final words is too simple. Rox mentions the poneglyphs in his final words. GK, thanks for the 10. I think Dom University works through negative emotions. For example, fear, anger, sadness, despair. Emu taunted Rox about his family first, and then Harold before Dom University. Contrasts with Joy Boy. That could go to the idea that, if Joy Boy fills people with exuberance and laughter and everything like that, that's able to counter Dom University. I don't think that you're making that as a prediction for the chapter, but I'm going to put it down anyway, and if you're right, then, kudos to you. I know it's a general comment, but I think that's an interesting idea. Dom University works from negative emotions. I'll just put that down for the sake of it. Why not? JWP, good to see you, man. Thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 35 months, man. Almost coming up on a full 3 years. Hey, Morge, after watching your video about the Void Century, it got me thinking. I feel like we're generally 1 or 2 more major reveals before we figure everything out. Any guess what those will be? The thing with One Piece is that, every time you think you're close, right? And you're going to figure everything out, there's more. That's the crazy thing. But it doesn't feel like Oda's bullshitting. So, for example, a lot of people felt like they had a pretty good idea of the general One Piece history and theories about the Void Century and everything like that. And then we got the mural. And the mural was, I think it was only 20 chapters back. It was earlier this year. And the mural absolutely flipped almost everybody's understandings of the story on their head. It confirmed, because so far most people, 90% of people were thinking, I think credit to some people. I think Archer already felt like there was a Void Century before the Void Century or something, or there are 2 separate timelines or something like that. But almost everybody was just the revelation that there's a first world was mind-blowing. And people had a lot of difficulty squaring that with all of the theories that people already had, right? So that was mind-blowing. That kind of turned the entire One Piece theory, theory community, whatever you want to say, into a loop, And even when it's okay, well, I think I know a lot about what happened in the first world, I put it into my mural stuff, then there's other stuff, which is what about that ancient laboratory that goes back thousands and thousands of years, the one that Vegapunk and Frankie are at, There's so many questions, so I don't think, honestly, I could be oh, if we just get this piece and this piece, then everything is solved. I think literally this is fucking stupid, but I think that the thing that will give us the most answers, it's very simple, is the One Piece itself. If we find out what the One Piece is, then that would be the reveal that solves it. I think Oda's done a phenomenal job of hiding what the One Piece is, because he's built such a complex web, and then the piece that's missing is the One Piece. I think it's just absolutely masterful storytelling that is the piece that would probably connect the most things. So if you had to ask me, I'd say the One Piece is probably the thing, I think the One Piece is the sun in the mural, or it's at least a part of that. But, we don't know till we find out. Not really an ostrich. Thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 8 months, man. I hope you enjoyed the podcast that just went up. How do you think Gear 5th affects Haki? When Luffy awakened, Kaido mentioned the crazy Haki coming out from the roof. Does Gear 5th give a Haki boost? Also, prediction, Emu and Saturn senses Rox's defeat and returns to the island. Let me jot that down real quick. I would love that, by the way, your prediction. Emu, Saturn sense Rox's defeat and returns to the island. Oops, sorry. I personally do not like the idea that Gear 5th Luffy, that the Nika fruit adds to Luffy's Haki. I don't think Kaido really commented on Luffy's Haki being stronger once he started fighting against Gear 5th Luffy. I kind of just took it as when Luffy awakened from death or whatever, that was just a really, really strong explosion of Haki coming from him. he himself said, this is it, I'm at my peak. So it's kind of like, if you look at the flow of the whole fight, like, a lot of things that happen, right? First, Luffy awakened Conqueror's Haki at the beginning, like towards the beginning, or advanced Conqueror's Haki at the beginning of the fight, so then he was still getting the hang of it. He got knocked off the roof. Then Luffy ate, came back, and now he's refreshed, and now he's got more of a handle on it, so now he clashes with Kaido. Now his advanced Conqueror's Haki is even more refined, so they're actually split the sky, right? So you already see a marked improvement from their initial fighting on the roof to when Luffy comes back after having eaten, right? Because now he can split the sky with Kaido. Then Luffy goes down again, this time seemingly dead, but now Luffy comes back like really feeling refreshed, at least at the moment, because like Gear 5th has put him, like he's literally, it's like the full force resurgence, like everything's coming back. His will is coming back, Gear 5th is taking over him, like the Nika Fruit's taking over him, it's pushing his mood, his spirit to the absolute maximum. I personally feel like it's Luffy's own Haki. But a lot of that might be biased because I just don't like the idea that a fruit can artificially give Luffy additional Haki. So I take it as just like, it really was Luffy like just exploding with Conqueror's Haki, you know? But it's his Haki personally. I think Gear 5th, where it's really useful, is it can add so much mass to Luffy's normal attacks and normal abilities, right? Because ultimately, again, at the climax of the fight, Luffy, his Conqueror's Haki was really good, but still not quite as good as Kaido's, right? But Luffy was able to use Gear 5th to make up for it, which is like, okay, even if my Conqueror's Haki is only this good, I can expand the size of what I'm coding with it to like gigantic, like absurdly huge levels that basically will allow me to make up for the gap in Conqueror's Haki that I might have with my opponent. That was my interpretation. Mouse Creative, thanks for the 10. Is the last major 1v1 Luffy had with zero aesthetics? So no assist, no running or recharge. It was versus Lucci in Eni's lobby. I really hope by the end of One Piece we get at least one uninterrupted 1v1. Caesar round 3, Chinjao. I guess if you're saying like serious high-level battles. Did he really get an assist against Katakuri? Yeah, he got to escape. He got to recharge. Here's the thing. Like, my interpretation is just always going to be different, which is, I mostly just count Luffy's final round. That's how I've always kind of felt about it. Not always. Like, for me, Luffy versus Lucci, obviously a very extended fight with, you know, a lot of shit that happens, but not really many breaks. There's, like, one mini break. But, I generally count Luffy's final round as like, I don't care if Luffy's getting help or like, because in a lot of these fights, he starts the fight not at the level of his opponent, but he needs some room to get there, right? So I'm okay with that. So like just by virtue of that being the concept behind a fight, you have to give Luffy some buffer room, right? But what I'm really judging is like, okay, once Luffy's gotten all of his power-ups, then assuming that he and his opponent at that point are in relatively similar health, that's all I care about. Then the final round to me is a fair fight. That's my reasoning. So I know a lot of people get really all over like, oh my god, Luffy got so much help against Kaido, yada, yada, yada. I'm just like, he did. But all I really care about is like, okay, well, what was it like once Luffy had completed all of his power-ups, right? Once Luffy gets Gear 5th and stuff, he's not getting any more help, right? There's not more assistance or anything like that, right? So to me, I just treat it as like, okay, final round Kaido versus Luffy, right? And at that point, it's established. To me, it's almost a clean slate. That's the round that I care about because now Luffy's on your level, right? So now how does it go? It's established that Luffy actually is in even worse condition than Kaido once that final round starts. So to me, I don't like I get what people are saying, but I don't mind it because I'm more so just like I just want to see what happens once Luffy's gotten all of the power-ups that he needs to get. Like I get Luffy versus Katakuri. There was a lot of like stuff that happened. Luffy left for a bit, then Katakuri like stabbed himself, yada yada. But Katakuri only stabbed himself because Katakuri was getting assistance from Flambe and stuff. To be fair. But there was a lot of shenanigans. All I really care about is like, okay, well, what happens in the final round once like, okay, now Luffy's gotten all of his power-ups, right? Now he's going to go Snake Man. They're both similarly been, like Luffy got injured, Katakuri injured himself. They even it out, right? That's all I really care about. Now I just want to see this. That's just me. I don't mind if Oda... Because if Oda doesn't do that, then it's basically like, well, Luffy doesn't have any room to get stronger over the course of the fight because his opponent would just kill him before he has room to get stronger, right? I feel like a lot of these fights, especially post-time skip, have been Oda pitting Luffy against an opponent who is initially stronger than him. Oda wants to conclude the fight with Luffy now being on his opponent's level and them duking it out on an even playing field, but you can't have Luffy get to that level unless you give him some buffer room to keep getting stronger over the course of the fight. So to me, it's just like it's a necessity that needs to be baked into the fight, I guess I would say, which is like, otherwise how would Luffy bridge the gap over the course of the fight? Like, otherwise it's just, yeah, Luffy's weaker than Kaido when he first sets foot on the roof. You want to just be Luffy and Kaido and Luffy dies? I know that's not what you're saying. I'm not trying to strawman, but I'm just like, how do you write a scenario where either Luffy has to go into every fight already pretty close to his opponent's level, or Oda would have to come up with like severe BS and plot hole logic as to why Luffy doesn't just die anytime he's put up against like, Kaido or Katakuri or something like an opponent who's out of his league, right? I like that Oda is giving himself room to write fights where Luffy gets to the level of his opponent. So, for example, you reference Luffy versus Lucci. Luffy versus Lucci is a good example in that that's a fight that Oda didn't have to give Luffy any sort of breaks, like any assistance or whatever throughout, because Luffy came into that fight already geared up. He'd come up with some new stuff and ready to go at Lucci, right? He was coming into the fight basically on Lucci's level, and then they were able to just duke it out, But I like that post-time skip, we're going to get scenarios like we've been getting where Luffy needs to grow over the course of the fight, and Oda needs to come up with ways to give Luffy that space to grow before the fight can become a true 1v1. All I care about is in the final round, once that's started, one, are both characters equally handicapped, right? And then two, at that point, does Luffy get any assistance, right? To me, with Luffy versus Katakuri, once the final round started, at that point in time, Snake Man versus Katakuri, at that point in time, they're both sufficiently handicapped. They've both done similar injuries or whatever. Katakuri injured himself to match Luffy's injury, right? So they're both similarly handicapped, and there's no assistance anymore, right? Luffy versus Kaido. Gear 5th Luffy versus Kaido, at that point in time, Luffy is as injured as Kaido, if not more. In fact, Kaido basically says that Luffy is actually even more injured than him at that point in time. Actually, same applies to Katakuri. Luffy was more injured. But yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, in the final round, is there assistance between Luffy versus Kaido? No. Are they both just as, like, injured and weak? Yes. So, to me, that's all I really care about. That's my personal sort of, what do you call? If people are like, oh, but if they played that fight again, then Luffy would lose because of stamina, I'm not debating that. I agree that Luffy's stamina is too low. He wouldn't be able to fight Kaido by himself, even now, right? But I actually am somebody that kind of just cares about, like that's different from the power scaling thing, right? So I'm not arguing like Luffy is above Kaido in overall power scaling. For me, it's just like in terms of my enjoyment of the fight. So it's kind of like when Luffy is in his final form, then I do want to see him going toe-to-toe with the villain without handicaps and without assistance. That's all I really care about, and I want to see Luffy getting the better of them. And if you want to argue that, like, okay, well, if they played it from the start, then Luffy would lose because of stamina, it's like, cool. I don't actually care about the marathon. I care about who's the faster sprinter. That's my thing. Because it's not a power scaling thing, right? Power scaling Kaido above Luffy. I'm just saying in terms of my narrative enjoyment, I kind of just want to see what happens when they both go all out at the end, without any handicaps and without any assistance. That's my narrative enjoyment. Two different things. Does that make sense? It's also why, like, Luffy versus Doflamingo, I get that, like, well, Doflamingo, like, there was a lot of stuff. Law helped beforehand. Doflamingo was really tired by the time it got to Gear 4th. But at the end of the day, for my narrative enjoyment, I just really liked seeing Gear 4th Luffy go 1v1 with Doflamingo and slap him around. I enjoyed seeing that. I don't want to see assistance during that period of time. I don't want to see like new handicaps given to Doflamingo or anything like that at that point in time. That's my enjoyment thing. You know what I'm saying? Okay, continuing on. Drink water, Peggy's leg, thanks to the 2. Prediction, Dragon goes to find Garp. Oh, that's an interesting prediction. Zeph, thanks to the 5. We jump years ahead to continue with Harold's story. In this timeline, we see Mihawk and Shanks' clash before we get Shanks' convo with Harold and Marijua. Oh, that's fanfiction-y, man. It would be crazy if we got that. We jump years ahead to continue Harold's story. We also get to see Mihawk and Shanks' clash before we get Shanks' convo with Harold in Marijua. Okay. Meek, thanks for the 5. Harold pulls out his horns at the end of the chapter. Oh, for not being a god, reasons not being related to god value, though. I wonder if he would pull him out of shame, though, for not being a god value. That's an interesting, I don't know. Harold pulls out his horns at the end of the chapter. Dick so small, I piss on the balls, thanks to the 5. I predict Rox somehow learns Kuma sent away his family. The joy undoes the curse, but he attacks Dragon's ship in pursuit of Imu. Ooh, that's a cool theory. Hold on. Rox learns Teach/Eris escaped. The joy undoes the curse, but he attacks Dragon's ship in pursuit of Imu. That'd be kind of crazy. Sorry, we're going a little bit fast because I think I mentioned earlier in the stream we're on a bit of a tighter time commitment today just because I do have a thing to go to after this. Brim thanks to the 2. Whitebeard's comment to Shanks makes no sense now. No, I think we just have to assume it came from like a duel with Roger. Because keep in mind, before we found out about Garling, for like years, like literally decades, everybody just interpreted Whitebeard's comment to Shanks as being Whitebeard referring to previous clashes that he'd had with Roger. Because prior to this, it had been established that Whitebeard and Roger were great rivals. They used to fight, and they used to be the only ones who could like tie with one another and everything. And Shanks being like part of Roger's ship, it was just like, oh, okay, that all follows. And it's kind of like seeing Shanks is basically kind of like a memory of those old days where Whitebeard and Roger's crews would fight. And that was the interpretation people had, that it's like Whitebeard's referring to Roger. There was no theories that like he's referring to Shanks' own father, like biological father or anything like that, until we learned about Garling himself, right? So that was newer stuff. Yeah, that was just newer stuff. So it still makes sense. We just revert back to our old interpretation. Jose Olat, thanks for the 5. Hi, Morge. You once said that Vinland Saga was your favorite before the Baltic Sea arc. The final arc seems to satisfy the fandom. Will you give it another shot? Vinland Saga was one of my favorites before the Baltic Sea arc. It's crazy because, like, Vinland Saga, I just talked about this in the latest Pirate King podcast even, because it came up there. I think it was the latest, I think it was the latest Pirate King podcast, or maybe it was the previous one. I think it was the latest one. Vinland, like, I swear I just talked about this. So Vinland Saga actually straight up competed with me for One Piece at one point. By the time the farm arc ended, which is around chapter 100, or also the ending of season 2 if you're an anime viewer, at that moment in time, I felt something I'd never felt in God knows how long. One, I felt like Thorfinn was challenging Luffy for me. Well, no, I actually felt like, I'd say Vinland Saga was challenging One Piece for me as like my favorite series. And not just like favorite manga. One Piece is my favorite, period. Like favorite story, movie, TV show, etc. Right? Like there's nothing else that has the sentimental attachment for me that I have for One Piece, okay? But Vinland Saga was the first thing that I just felt so like riveted by. And I was just like, this could. I also think I was reading it at a point in time where I wasn't so hot on One Piece, probably during the Wano storyline or something like that. So a lot of little factors there, and I was just like, I really fucking love this. And Thorfinn, in that moment, actually became my favorite manga main character. Probably my favorite. I think Thorfinn at that point in time I felt like he was my favorite character arc of any character that I'd read or watched, period. I think Thorfinn was maybe my favorite character, like, in general. So that was kind of insane. The Baltic Sea War arc shits on Vinland so much. How to explain this? There are stories where I think you can have, like, a bad arc or something like that here or there, and it doesn't change my overall feelings about the story as long as it can be rectified in the next arc. I think One Piece is kind of like that. Vinland Saga feels different to me because when I was reading Vinland Saga, I felt like it was all building on its own, like, the story approaches its themes, its messaging, and its character writing with a great deal of heaviness, great deal of weight, and consistency in terms of what it's building. I felt like the Baltic Sea War arc shit on a few things. I feel like it shit on pretty much all of Thorfinn's previous development over the course of the previous 100 chapters, just for the sake of some very contrived new character conflict. Very, very contrived, right? So there's nothing. So that's number one. And two, I feel like it treated its own themes with a level of triviality all of a sudden, but then also tried to play both sides and, like, try and treat it very seriously again. But it kind of just threw a lot of the. I think it's very, very difficult to build a sense of gravitas and weight with the ideas that you're handling in the story. And I think it's so easy to throw it away. Okay? So I think it did that. And then with Thorfinn's character, the stuff that happened in the Baltic Sea War negates pretty much everything that I spent the previous 100 chapters reading for Thorfinn's character, right? So, if the final arc now has some new good character writing for Thorfinn, that's not going to magically change the fact that the first 100 chapters of Thorfinn's character development were already kind of, like, written to be hollow or fake, right? So it doesn't fit, like, does that make sense? It's kind of like, it basically said the entire character arc that we kind of created, that the author basically created, he threw that out the window, right? So that character arc is just gone no matter what, right? So the final arc, even if it redoes things and brings Thorfinn back to where I feel like the farm arc kind of put him at, it doesn't really matter because, like, it's already shit on. The reason I hate the Baltic Sea War arc is not just because that's a bad arc in and of itself, but because it negates so much of what came before it. And that's very hard to fix. Like, if I'm reading One Piece and I really dislike Wano, that doesn't negate Enies Lobby for me. That doesn't negate Marineford or Alabasta, right? But the way that Vinland Saga storytelling works, which is very much like, it's much more continuous in terms of how it builds things and the general character arc. There's nothing I don't think there's anything the final arc could do that would suddenly be like, it would have to retcon the story of the Baltic Sea War arc to once again give meaning to the initial character arc that Thorfinn had. That's my view. Antonio620, thanks for the 5. Dom Reversi works once Imu knows your strength of will and flips it. For example, Rox saving his family turns to killing them. Oh, interesting. That's an interesting idea. I'll put that down as a speculation, even though I don't think you're necessarily saying that as a chapter prediction, but I'll just put it down anyway. Lies on Imu knowing what your will is and flipping it. Example, Rox wants to save his family. Rox kill his family. Antonio. Okay. B Muddy 120, thanks for the 2. Rate Elbaf 1 to 10 now as an arc. I really don't like rating. I'd say right now Elbaf's at a 9 for me. Elbaf's at a 9. I need the God Valley flashback to finish. And then I need Elbaf's own plot to play out. Musa Creative. Thanks for the 10. I get your point. Interesting that the help happens more in post-time skip. I don't think it's bad, but honestly, my two favorite fights are full 1v1 and end with the greatest Gatling gun ever, Lucci and Crocodile. My two favorite fights are full 1v1 and end with the greatest Gatling gun ever. Yeah, okay, so I think that Crocodile's, I love the Gatling finishes that Oda writes. I love those type of like the barrage of punches, because it's unique to One Piece. I rarely see that in other series. The Gatling idea is really cool to me. Also, I'm going to have to end Supers right here. I know early, but I'm just tight on time today. I'm sorry, guys. But I love that because it just feels like you get so much emotion out of it. Other stories tend to end with like one big attack or whatever, which is still good in One Piece too. But I just love the emotion that comes from like seeing Luffy just unleash a storm of blows, literally, like against Crocodile. Against Crocodile, I think the anime really elevated it. Against Lucci, I think it was phenomenal in the manga, but then the anime took it to another level. Like Luffy's Jet Gatling against Lucci is my favorite moment in anime, period. I don't think that's ever going to change. I can't imagine that ever changing. Now, as for the help happens more in the post-time skip, I think that that's a product of how Oda's writing Haki to some degree, because Haki blooms in battle, right? So pre-time skip, what Oda would usually do if Luffy's up against an opponent that's stronger than him, like let's say a Crocodile or a Lucci, right? Then what Oda would do is like have Luffy lose a round, then you get a break, reset, Luffy comes back sharper, and then Luffy fights another round, right? So like that's what happened with Crocodile. Luffy took 3 attempts to beat him. And so people felt like the third attempt was basically like Luffy did it fair, right? There was no assistance, no extra stuff or whatever. Even though Luffy fell short the previous 2 rounds, right? Luffy versus Lucci, again, he lost at Water 7, but he got to regroup, come up with gears and stuff, come back and fight Lucci again, right? And this time he's on Lucci's level, right? So now no assistance needed, no outside help, you just go at it till one of you wins, right? Post-time skip, because Oda's introduced Haki, I feel like with Haki, Oda wants the idea of like a Haki bloom happening in battle, right? So it's not like if Luffy would like, let's say Oda wants Luffy to be able to let's say Oda wants Luffy to become strong enough to defeat Katakuri, but the rule is that you can't do that by like going off and trading, or like just taking a break and like just coming back with stronger Haki. That's not really a thing, right? So if Oda's like, no, Luffy needs to get stronger over the course of the fight, and that's the new rule, then it's like, well, how do we make this make sense? Because Luffy's starting the fight way below Katakuri, but he needs to get to Katakuri's level without Katakuri killing him. So Oda needs to come up with some gimmicks along the way that allow Luffy to last and last. Maybe that's help. Maybe that's escaping, taking a break, coming back. Maybe that's Katakuri even like handicapping himself, right? So like Oda needs gimmicks to give Luffy the room to have his Haki slowly bloom over the course of the battle. And then by the end of that fight, Luffy's gonna be on his opponent's level. And to me, that's what I look forward to, which is like, okay, by the end of the fight, is Luffy now on the opponent's level? Yes. Now no more gimmicks? Yes. Both characters are sufficiently injured and about same playing field in terms of handicap? Yes. Okay, cool. Now let me watch this fight, right? To me, it's not that dissimilar to Oda. Like, I think people wouldn't complain, for example, if Oda just did it like pre-time skip, where like instead, let's say Luffy loses to Katakuri, goes off, trains, masters his observation Haki, comes back, and then they just have the same Snake Man fight that they did at the end of the battle, right? But Oda's rule is the Haki has to bloom during battle. So now it's not like Luffy can just go and train it. He has to do it over the course of the battle, which means it necessitates Oda coming up with some BS gimmicks to allow that sequence of events to happen. Kaido, same thing, but just in an even more elaborate way, right? Like, Luffy can go and train in Udon and stuff after his first loss to Kaido, but that's not going to get him as many gains as Luffy just duking it out with Kaido for like hours on end on the rooftop till he gets his power-ups, right? You know? So that's just the rules that Oda created, which means that's the story has to play out in that, like, fights have to play out in that way, where now if Luffy is going into a fight against someone stronger than him, he can no longer just like lose and then come back, try again, and he'll be stronger. He'll probably be a little bit stronger, as we saw between like pre-Udon training and post-Udon training, but it's not going to bridge the gap, because that's not how Haki works. It has to be in battle, right? So I'm going in circles here, but you get what I'm saying. Like, how else can Luffy catch up to Kaido outside of just continually trying to fight against Kaido, catching some lucky breaks, and then continually upping his haki over the course of the fight till finally he is now caught up to Yonko level, right? That's just the rules that Oda created. That's why the fights kind of have to play out that way, you know? All right, everybody. I do unfortunately have to call stream here. But the good news is, we've got the Boss Poster collection still going. If you want Rocks, if you want Emu, these characters are only available this month. Choose your side. And the cool thing is, we have an amazing deal going right now where you can get any 2 of these boss posters, then you get another 2 free, so buy 2, get 2, and you get to pick either Rocks or Emu for free on top of that. So you get buy 2, get 3. That's a fucking crazy deal. And the third poster that you're getting for free, it's either Rocks or Emu, so you basically get to pick which one is your favorite that you want on your walls. So amazing buy 2, get 3 deal. If you want to get the whole collection, you will get both Rocks and Emu, and we've got a huge deal for that. So make sure you get your posters, everybody. Rocks and Emu, they're only going to be available. Don't look at the sold out thing. That just means you can't buy them individually. You can get them if you get the bundle. But they will not be available after this month. That's for real, right? So after this month, Rocks and Emu are out. Rest of the boss posters, we'll see. But Rocks and Emu, definitely gone. They're out of production after this. You got to get them as part of the bundle, basically. So if you want one of these 2 or both of them, then just do the... just pick out your batch of 5 posters that you want, and you're going to get to pick one of these 2. Also, other big thing, we are doing a giveaway for all of the boss posters. If you have not heard the news yet, we have a One Dream Studio Instagram. If you go and follow this Instagram, every single person that follows the Instagram has a chance at winning the free giveaway for all of these posters. These posters obviously look really fucking good. So just go give us a follow, and you're immediately entered into the giveaway. And the giveaway winner will be picked on stream by the end of the month. So yeah, just go check it out. Yeah, give us a follow. You're immediately entered to the giveaway. And yeah. All right, everybody. We got one more comment here. Marco Saint, thanks a lot. Garp will talk about or hint on him confronting the Gorosei. I can add that in, man. And we're going to close stream on that. Let's see. Hold on. Oh, my God. Okay, here we go. No more. I'm not accepting any supers after this. I'm sorry. I just got to go. Second and fourth prediction don't have names? Oh, fuck. Well, Drinkwater pegged the... Oh, shit. No, Drinkwater pegged these legs. So I think it's just this one. Right? Oh, second and fourth. Okay, I will look through stream after this and figure out who it is. I'm sorry about that. Garp will talk about or hint on him confronting Gorosei. All right, everybody. We are going to call it there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I will check on those no matter what. I promise. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, with that, I will talk to you all later. Thank you for helping me catch that at the end. I appreciate that. Talk to you all later, everybody, and watch out for this Tuesday's video because we got a really juicy